Do you know Richard Davidson, Dr. Richard Davidson?
Yeah, from University of Wisconsin.
Exactly, Madison. He's in today's New York Times, and I didn't know this about him, but he just got a $50,000 grant from the Dalai Lama. He knew the Dalai Lama like 20 years ago or something, got to know him, they're good friends. It says right here in the paper, Dr. Davidson promised the Dalai Lama that he would do everything he could to put compassion on the scientific map. So the promise that he made years
Isn't that
ago.
great? Oh, what's interesting is they did some studies with some of the Tibetan monks from Dharamsala a couple of years ago in the laboratories, and when the monks were meditating on compassion, they were achieving gamma brainwave frequencies that for the first time ever were measured in the human brain. Wow. And gamma brainwave frequency is the most powerful frequency in the universe, not just in our brains. We were unaware that our brains were able to achieve that frequency, but the meditators, who are obviously the Olympic athletes of meditation, are the monks in Tibet who meditate 6 to 8 hours a day, they were able to achieve that frequency when they were in a state of compassion.
Excellent. That is amazing. It's amazing to me that some of these big developments in our world sort of stemmed from an earlier promise. I guess that's really the whole premise of the promise is that there's a promise that helps to motivate people. And I know even in your book you talk about the 7 power factors, and I'm just making this connection that for all of those, persistence and attitude, I'm looking at them now, discipline, purpose, focus, action, all of those, I only mentioned 6, I guess, vision, all of those connect to making a promise. They keep you focused. The promise keeps you focused. The promise keeps you taking action. The promise keeps you disciplined, because once you've made the promise, failure is not an option. My view of the promise, if you make a promise to someone you care about, as I did with my mother, and I made a promise that I would finish writing a book that she and I had talked about, and I would dedicate it to her memory. That's really where I got started on all this, is Beautiful. That there is a heart connection, so that you commit emotionally to achieving that goal. So that's where the magic, and I call it the 2 magic words, I promise. If you say those 2 magic words, you can change your life. So that's kind of what I'm getting at with this whole project.
Yeah, I love it. I think there's a huge difference between having a goal for yourself and setting a promise to yourself or to somebody else. And so I definitely would agree with you.
And not to disparage goal setting, but as people talk about setting a goal, I think of goal setting as being a little bit antiseptic. I mean, you sort of, okay, I want to achieve this, I want to achieve that, but once you've made the promise, there's sort of this emotional connection or this heart connection that makes it even more powerful. I talk about setting a promise as a goal on steroids, as a way to really amp up your commitment to it. So that's, yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I just have to agree. I think it takes it to another dimension. People tend to, we learn from childhood, don't break your promise, or parents will say to kids, I promise, yep. And as soon as we say I promise, we teach our kids that we don't want to break our promises. So we're neurologically, I believe, wired not to break our promises.
That's a great point. I wrote an article about this. I don't know if you've noticed, I created something called Make a Promise Day. I launched Make a Promise Day this year, just a few months ago. It was just an idea I had. It was one of these epiphanies, like, well, why don't we start this whole idea of making a promise with a day, an annual celebration, this personal empowerment, this integrity enhancement kind of day, because that's the other piece of making a promise and keeping your word. It enhances integrity. And so I think it can ultimately transform the world if millions of people are doing this, making promises, achieving their goals, enhancing their integrity. So we actually do become the change we want to see in the world, as Gandhi talked about. You feel like you have a good story, and it doesn't have to be just one. We can try a couple of them. But anytime you're ready.
One of the main ones, that I recall very, very vividly was the day that my first son was born. And for whatever reason, that day I felt compelled, when I knew that he was going to be born that day, I felt compelled to get into a shower, and I scrubbed myself, from head to toe. And my belief was that that was the day that I was being given a gift from God. And for the 9 months preceding this day, God had taken care of my unborn, son in the womb for, the 285 days or so that it takes to gestate. And, when my son was born, I made a promise to God that, thank you so much for taking care of my child, up until now, and now I promise to take beautiful care of the child that you've given me the responsibility to raise in the best way that I know how. And that was a very, very clear promise that I made when both of my children were born. And I really believed that it was a partnership that was created not only between me and my boys, but between me and God, and that I would do anything and everything to fulfill that promise until they were old enough to go out on their own, and then teach them to fulfill their promises if they're ever going to be, a parent. But that was a very, 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 this is 15 and 13 years ago. And as soon as, I was asked, what if I made a promise? I was trying to come up with one. I remember, having the dialogue in my heart and in my mind with God, making that promise. And so when this opportunity came to share the story with you, I was like, that's one that I think would be at least worthwhile expressing the seriousness to me of that promise and the relationship that I have with my boys today as a result of that, and in fulfilling that as best as I can.
Wow, John, that is a beautiful story. In fact, as I was contemplating and trying to figure out how to, because there are different kinds of promises, there are different points in our lives we make these kinds of promises, it occurred to me that it might be a nice tradition to start to make promises to newborn children. And some religions probably do that. I don't know for sure. But to make a promise, you have a newborn child, and make a promise to take care of, and exactly as you expressed it. We don't do that necessarily. We celebrate it. Obviously, we give out cigars or whatever. We used to do that. But, we celebrate the newborn, but we don't make these explicit promises. And the way you just described it, that really does speak to that, because you have to bring in a new life into the world.
Well, if you think about, we get married, we make promises, vows to each other. Why not to a child that's just been born? And it was really bizarre, I've got to tell you, Matthew, is obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but I shower every day and sometimes twice a day. But on this particular day, I felt compelled to scrub myself. I took off all my jewelry, anything that I had on, and I scrubbed myself from head to toe as if, my child was being handed over to me from one God's hands to my hands, and so that was a feeling that I'll never forget, and a promise that I will never forget. And even as I think about it, I'm getting a little choked up.
It does. It chokes me up just listening. I got to tell you, it's amazing, and that's where the heart connection comes in.
That's right.
You're really expressing something that's deep, and you haven't thought about it. I mean, it's just part of your life. But
it's
when asked about a promise,
I made a promise.
Yeah.
I made a promise, and I made a promise to God.
Yeah. You can't go back on. These are like,
I made a promise. That one's one you don't want to go back on.
That's right. You got to watch yourself. I made a promise, one I told you about, to my mother on her deathbed. Right. I don't know if you read about it, but it was on her deathbed, and we had talked about this book, and the book, I finished it. In fact, at the time, I didn't even know if I could finish the book. I just had some ideas about, the habits of failure and success, and it was a great idea, 7-letter acronym for failure, 7 letters in success. No one else has noticed that, and at some point I'll send you a copy of the book. But I wrote the book, dedicated it to her memory, and, I felt really good about it. And then I realized, I think there's more to this. There's more to it than me just doing that promise. There's more to it I am now sort of on a mission to spread this power of making a promise through stories like you just told, and Oprah and some other folks who have done this, and then help to empower millions of others through this. And I know that's the work you're involved in as well. So there's a nice synchronicity here. Yeah, right. I mentioned Make a Promise Day. It's May 4th. And so the second annual Make a Promise Day is coming up next year, 2011, on May 4th. Just so you know, and I do this with radio interviews, just so you know, I always ask the interviewer, ask me why I picked May 4th.
Why'd you pick May 4th?
Perfect. You play along. I appreciate it. I picked May 4th because it was the only day of the year I could actually say the following words and it would make sense. May the 4th be with you. Now, harumph, harumph.
Very good.
May the 4th be with you works, and it's a personal empowerment day. So on May 4th, and of course people can make promises throughout the year, like for instance on birthdays, I recommend that people, instead of blowing out candles and making a wish, blow out the candles and make a promise.
Love it. Would be more than happy to do it. It's a great cause and great mission you're on.
I really do appreciate it.
Good purpose. You got a good purpose, good mission, good vision. Attracts good people, I think.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations again on what you're doing.
Thank you very much, and hey, congratulations on you. Are you in that house of yours?
I am in that house.
Beautiful house.
I am.
I've seen pictures of it from afar, from the aerial shots, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's a good vision. I'll put that on my vision board.
Hey, don't kick me out of here so fast.
No, I'm saying, maybe be a house like that. It won't be the exact house.
Good. All right, Matthew. Have an amazing day.
Nice.
Thank you again. You too.
You too. Thanks very much.